morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to have a little bit of a chat about Marnie's Grimmsnarl. Because you see, when this was revealed over in Japan, remember we got the Marnie deck, right, over in Japan. And it had all the Marnie cards in. And I told you, look, there's some great support here. We'll talk about that more as we go through the video. But I'm not sure there's actually an attacker. And then we got the Marnie deck revealed for the West. And I said, well, same kind of deal, honestly. Cool deck. We like the deck. I'm not sure it's going to be good. And for a little while, it has been out in Japan. And it hasn't been good. And over the past week or so, things have been changing. And things have changed to the point where, you know what? Maybe it is good now. Maybe actually we've gotten to the point where Marnie's Grimmsnarl is good. And the Marnie deck as a whole is good. And we need to have a little bit of a chat about this. Because I'm starting to see it popping up. Take a look at his little top 16 metagame shared by PokeCardBook. And I can see as well as you can that Marnie's Grimmsnarl is 3.5% of the metagame. But you know what? It's right down there with Charizard, Golden Go, and Terrabox. All of which we know to be good. And all of which we acknowledge as good decks. Well, yeah. Seems like Marnie's Grimmsnarl is joining them. And it's actually good. And I'm going to be honest with you, dudes. I did not see this coming. And it turns out no other Pokemon was needed. No other attacker was necessary here. Grimmsnarl alone was enough. Now, remember Grimmsnarl? We saw Grimmsnarl way back at Worlds. We saw Grimmsnarl back before we knew what the set was going to be, so we've had a wonky English version of this for a while now. And we know that the ability lets you, when you evolve into it, attach 5 basic darkness from your hand to your Marnie's Pokemon in any way you like. And then for 2 energy to 180 plus 30 to one of your opponent's bench. And I told you guys that this wasn't enough. I told you that the 320 HP was good. The weakness was actually kind of cool. No one's really playing grass right now. Well, that's a lie. There's some Teal'c's Gogapon running around, obviously, but it's not the end of the world. And I told you that the energy acceleration was great. And I basically said, look, this attack doesn't do enough damage. And if we look at the lists that are winning in Japan right now, yeah, it's not doing enough damage. Honestly. It's not doing enough damage. Which is where Munkidori comes in. And seriously, I know we've talked about it quite a bit on this channel. I don't think enough people are really acknowledging quite how broken Munkidori is. And then we saw it come to a head, really early on last year at the North American International Championships, where Gardevoir was just owning the tournament and Munkidori was just showing its power. But we've seen Munkidori popping up here, there, and everywhere since. And I honestly don't think enough people are really acknowledging quite how great Munkidori is. It's got that ability whereby if there's a darkness energy attached to it, you can move 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponents. Lovely. And one of the important things to note here is we don't need to worry about the energy acceleration. Because we're accelerating energy with Grimmsnarl. Now, very important, obviously Grimmsnarl is only accelerating to Marnie's Pokemon, not to Munkidori. But obviously, if you're accelerating to Grimmsnarl, then you can use your attachment for the turn to pop onto Munkidori. And we are seeing, some of the lists I'm seeing out there are playing like 1 energy. It generally does tend to be 1 energy switch. People are not playing loads, but just give you an option to get another Munkidori rolling if you need it. Okay. But what next? Oh, Froslass. Yeah, this is Froslass territory, boy. That is how this becomes awesome. Because what Froslass does is during Pokemon Checkup, it drops 1 damage counter on each Pokemon, yours and your opponent's, that has an ability. And if we look at the deck, well, Munkidori has an ability and Grimmsnarl has an ability. So the 2 Pokemon that we're mostly relying on here will take damage from Froslass. But that's why we're generally playing free Munkidori. And the list I'm seeing in Japan, that generally the standard is free Munkidori. Free Munkidori is generally what we're seeing here. Not a hard and fast rule, but generally speaking, free Munkidori is the way. And what this means is that you're taking all that damage from Froslass, as well as any damage your opponent might be just naturally doing to Grimmsnarl, which remember has 320 HP, which is kind of huge, and then just chucking it straight back to your opponent. And then this is how we fix the problem of not doing enough damage with Grimmsnarl. No, Grimmsnarl does not do enough damage. But when you combine it with potentially free Munkidori in a turn, plus remember your opponent will also be taking those damage counters from Froslass. Yeah, that sounds good to me. Other Pokemon we play here, we do generally play 1 copy of Marnie's Morpeko. I don't think Marnie's Morpeko is busted by any stretch of the imagination, but used in moderation, yeah, this makes perfect sense. Honestly, absolutely perfect sense. Because we've got an attack here which is basically too expensive, let's be clear. This attack is too expensive. It's 20 damage base, plus 40 more for each darkness energy attached to Morpeko. But if you take like 5 darkness energy from a Marnie's Grimmsnarl ability and put them all on Morpeko, you do 220. It's not that much. But Marnie's Grimmsnarl only needs 2 energy. So like the first Grimmsnarl you evolve up into is basically going to get all your energy out you need to actually attack with. So why not pile some energy from a second Grimmsnarl onto a Morpeko and use as a single prize attacker? Why not? You're playing a stage 2 deck, so obviously Badoo comes a very big deal here. You're going to need to use Badoo potentially in the early game, slow it right down, and then get to a point where you're actually evolved up. Badoo will help you there. As a side note, TM Evolution obviously also very important here, because TM Evolution essentially, you go second. Turn 1, you evolve 2 of your bench Pokemon, and then you can stage 2 on turn 2. So yeah, you need TM Evolution. That becomes a pretty important card, frankly. And that's how you get into time. A mixture of Badoo and TM Evolution should, in theory, give you enough time to evolve up into them. Another card I'm seeing, not in every list, admittedly, but I am seeing Maractus in the majority of the lists here. People are kind of loving Maractus, very much as a one-of. But the thing is, if it's in the active and is knocked out by damage from your opponent's Pokemon, you put 6 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. But you've also got single energy 20 damage and they can't retreat. So the theory here very simply is keep them in the active, make them knock you out, they take the damage, and then you're also putting a whole bunch of other damage around the field. It's generally played as a one-off, but it's still enough to make a difference. And then we've got Shaman, which is your bench protector here. We are playing Shaman. Shaman is protecting your bench. No, it won't protect your Grimmsnarl because it only gives protection to non-rulebox Pokemon. Basically, it sits there, and while it's in play, your bench non-rulebox Pokemon don't take damage from your opponent's attacks. But basically, it's there to protect things like your Munkidori. And this is a standard. You'll see this in like every list. Okay, cool. What else are we seeing here? Well, in terms of other cards, there's a lot that you would expect, including, obviously, the Marnie Stadium. And seriously, the Marnie Stadium here, so good. Spikemuth, it's called. Because what Spikemuth does is, once during a turn, you search for a Marnie Pokemon and put it into your hand. Absolutely redonkulous consistency here. So yeah, absolute no-brainer here. Playing Spikemuth has just got to be done. The other one we're playing here is Artisan. Just lets you search for a basic Pokemon that doesn't have a rule box and bench it. Yeah. Obviously. It's not a particularly exciting card, but by the same token, you need your basics out. And again, this is basically for Munkidori. I'm not saying it's the only use for it. There are other Pokemon in your deck, things like your Froslass line, getting all of that out. But a lot of the time, this is just going to be a way to make sure you can get your Munkidori and keep them out on the field, which is going to be a pretty important thing. We also need to mention here that Counter Catcher, pretty big deal, and the lists I'm seeing are all playing like 3 or 4 copies of Counter Catcher. Because this is not necessarily a deck that is taking big KOs. It's not a deck that really wants to take big KOs. What this deck does is wear you down with the damage from Froslass, and wear you down with the bench damage from Grimmsnarl's attack, and wear you down with the damage that's being moved from Munkidori. And while it's doing all of this, one thing it can do is not take prizes. Get a lot of damage on the field, but manipulate it with things like Munkidori to make sure you're not taking prizes. And as long as you're not taking prizes, you can be behind in the game. And as long as you're behind on prizes, that means Counter Catcher is just item-based gusting. And that's why we're generally seeing, 2 to 4, but more often 3 or 4 than 2. The reason is very simply because you can make sure that you are just sitting there, getting everything close to being KO'd, have those big multi-knockout turns with stuff like, the residual damage from Grimmsnarl, Munkidori, etc. And for that whole time, you're sitting there having item-based gusting. And then, yes, obviously our race spec of choice here is going to be Reset Stamp for the reasons I just mentioned. Giving your opponent a 2-card hand after they take a prize, making them have a couple of turns where they can't do very much, and using that turn to start really piling damage up on your opponent's side of the board. Ho, 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 ho! This is fun. This is very, very fun. So let's see some deck lists then. You've got the date and the shop on the bottom of them here. Shout out to Pokécard Book. Here's one which is actually not playing miraculously, and only playing 2 Counter Catcher, but you'll notice the stem of these is all the same. You've got your Froslass, you've got your Grimmsnarl, and your stadiums are all the same. You've got your Counter Catcher and everything else. They're all incidentally playing Unfair Stamp. They're all playing the same A-Spec. Here's another one. Again, we got 3 Munkidori. Here we are playing Maractus, and we've gone up to 4 Counter Catcher, although we have had to take a little bit of a hit on stadiums to do so. Here is a third list, very similar again. Still 3 Munkidori, still Maractus, still 3 Counter Catcher here. And here is list number 4. Again, you'll be noticing these are very, very similar. And what we got here again, 3 Munkidori. We've got Maractus. Worth noting there's 2 Badoo here. And actually, of the lists I've shown you, 1 had 1 Badoo, 3 had 2. But we got the same A-Spec, 3 Counter Catcher, a lot of what we would be expecting. This list has gone up to 2 TM Evolution. Worried about it being prized, which I do get, because like I said, very important. You may also notice none of these lists are playing more than a single rare candy. Some aren't playing any. Because again, that is not really what you're doing here. Rare Candy gives you that burst potential. What you really want to do here is evolve up naturally and save a bit of time while we do so. There we go. Also, evolving up naturally is kind of cool, because what you can do if you want to is leave your stage 1 on the bench and not evolve up into Grimmsnarl, who has an ability and will take damage from Froslass, until you absolutely have to. So there we go. Grimmsnarl. Apparently it's really good. I was really doubting this, but over the past week or 2, things have started changing, and this is getting very interesting. So tell me what you think about all of this, whether you're taking this seriously, in the comment section. Get us! Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at Lawasi. That's where we talk about Pokemon and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, all kinds of fun things, and get shout-outs on the channel, like the lovely Derek, who's one of our newer patrons, seems to be a very lovely person, so shout out to them for the support and the loveliness. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.